Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads. And as always, welcome back to our Around the Hearth discussions. This time, we are going to be discussing miniatures versus theater of the mind, or maybe theater of the mind versus grid, or however you want to look at that. I'm sure we'll discuss multiple facets as we get into it. But before we do, let's go ahead and do our announcements from our attendees. So, I'll give everybody else time to think about what they want to say. I am Adam L. Spain with the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and we thank you for stopping by. Our current announcement would be that we are getting ourselves set and kind of planning our collaborative stuff with Avenue Studios and all the things we have going on with that. If you're curious about that in a little bit more detail, then you can go and check our main channel video, which is the Waypoint Report, the update for New Year's 2022/2023, that New Year video that we came out with. And that will discuss, that will list off for you the different themed months that we have coming up starting in March, which will begin with March of the Mechs. So that should be quite entertaining. I am looking forward to seeing some of the stuff that we do with that. I think we're starting to pick systems for the different ones that we're going to do, the different spotlights, and all the such things. As far as announcements aside from the collaboration stuff, we are going to be doing art streams like we've talked about. The internet is not in yet. The fiber optic is not fully in yet, but it should be fairly soon. I don't expect it to take too much longer. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to do that, because I have art I need to make. But that's beside the point. Well, that's not beside the point. That's part of the point. So, aside from that part of the point, we did do a kind of live art stream not long ago with our announcement about how the OGL is going to affect the Inn of Planar Crossroads. Short kind of summation is it won't really. We were already system agnostic here to begin with, so we should be fine. Don't have to worry about that, but you should still care about the whole thing. Anyway, check that video out for that. And as a third announcement, we're on our way to at least the milestone for this year. The goal for this year is to get to $100 a month of support from all the different ways we are supported together. So that's Patreon, Locals, Subscribestar, or direct contact, which would be done and handled through PayPal usually. So those are the ways that you can support the Inn of Planar Crossroads, as well as our, not sister channel, our favorite collaborative buddy, I guess, channel, Avenue Studios, which is run by Dan.
Hello. And I call Adam my brother, so it's, Yeah. I am Dan from Avenue Studios. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble, and anywhere you find your podcasts. Our biggest thing is we are live streaming Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. By the time this comes out, we should have wrapped our Outlaws of Alkenstar, because the next session, as of recording tonight, will probably be the finale session. So check that out. It's a really great story arc. I can't wait to see how it ends. And then that same group will be moving on to a different game, possibly in Savage Worlds. We're still discussing in the background, but check out our live streams, and of course, on those live streams, we'll be doing the collaborations within Planar Crossroads, doing Force Forge, building the one-shot we talk about, crafting in Around the Hearth, and then we'll build it in Foundry, and then we'll play it as a live stream all in that month. And hopefully, of course, notwithstanding all the OGL stuff that's going on, we'll have those for purchase as modules for Foundry. So that's the plan, assuming we get all the background set up on that. And I think the last thing, as of recording, we are 3 supporters away from our current supporter challenge. And if we hit those 3 more supporters between Patreon and locals, we are going to do a special Kanaga movie night, which is my senior thesis film from 15 years ago, starring a lot of people in Avenue Studios that are all 15 years younger than. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Ryan's going to hate it, but he's graciously letting us do it. We'll have a special camera on him for that.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll have, yeah. We're going to make Austin and Ryan sit together. Yeah. Yes. Just torment him. And not only that, we'll be doing giveaways and stuff.
I was looking back at the first episode of Bomb Squad. I was like, man, even they look younger.
I know.
4 years ago. Less children. I've aged rapidly.
It is.
But yeah, so we'll have tons of giveaways and stuff. And the giveaways, dice pads, full snap tray dice, maybe some other cool stuff. DVDs of Kanaga, which has behind-the-scenes stuff and like bonus stuff I did in college. It's a lot of fun. But the giveaways are only for our supporters, so it'll be during our movie night. So I'm very much hoping we hit that this year, and it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I like that idea. All right. So that means we have a guest we usually don't have tonight. Moustache. Great Moustache.
Hey.
Anything you want to announce going on with Open Legend or otherwise?
Well, I guess the biggest thing is we're currently out of physical books for the core rules.
Oh.
I was not expecting, when I looked at the stock, I expected it to last through the new year. But with certain things going on in the community and stuff, it's currently sold out. And unfortunately, there's complication in that after I took it over, I don't have access to whatever documents were originally sent to whatever printer he used. So I have to recreate the core rules PDF for the printer from scratch.
Oh.
So I'm currently working on that. But the good news about that is at the same time, I'll be working on the official SRD document too. So, because having one will be able to easily have the other. So I'm currently working on that, and hopefully we'll get some reprints. I mean, of course, it depends on the printer I use and how long they take. But hopefully by February, I'll have the core rules back in stock. And because of things going on in the wider community with OGL and stuff, I've put the Amour's Dawn setting to be the same price as the PDF normally, so it's just $20 plus shipping, and you can get the physical book.
Sweet.
And the code SWITCH gets you $5 off anything. So you could actually get it for like $15.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Cool beans. I hope that the updated rulebook has because right now the physical book has invisible in it. Hopefully,
yeah, it's going to have all the updated stuff to it.
Sweet.
Depends on time, but if I have the time, I'm going to try and put an index in it too.
Ooh, nice.
So yeah, it'll have the updated concealment. It's going to fix some of the typos and stuff for some of the Banes, which has been an interesting discussion on the Discord recently. But that's not. Anyways.
Yeah.
But there is a Open Legend Discord which you can get access to. So there you go.
Yes.
And it is actually
lots
fairly
of
active.
helpful people. Yeah.
So. All right.
Oh, the other thing is, and I might see if you guys want to help with this at some point, but I'm considering, I haven't fully fleshed it out, but I've been wanting to do it anyways, where like maybe a Patreon or whatever, where I'm going to release creatures. And not just like the creatures, but it'll be a way to show you how to make them and how to make them in different settings and stuff. And then after so many of them are released, compile it into a book. So I'm going to finalize some of that stuff maybe this month, and then maybe announce it officially here. But I think I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I'm planning on that. So that'll be a Patreon, and the stuff will be released regardless of whether you're a Patreon supporter or not. But you can get early access to it via the Patreon, and then it'll also help support artwork for stuff down the road. Is the idea.
Nice.
Cool beans. Awesome. All right. So that is Moustache and Dan and myself. So now that means we are done with announcements and are on to our spotlight. So, our resident spotlighter, Levi, do you have a spotlight for us?
Well, normally, I have so many times where I spotlight larger things, but as we've been discussing with the OGL stuff, I think Roll for Combat is one of the better places to get some interesting things about the OGL issues. This is a shout out more specifically for 5e players looking for a close game.
Okay.
Roll for Combat's pretty good. They do the Battle Zoo Bestiary, and they've had a lot of coverage over this and been a large part of leaking stuff about the OGL. So they'd be a good place to look back over it if you're not 100% sure what OGL stuff we're talking about.
Indeed. So that's Roll for Combat on YouTube?
Yes.
Alright. I've got them pulled up. So that's Battle Zoo Bestiary that they do a lot. Roll for Combat. There we are.
Yeah, they have a lot of that other stuff. They're closely tied with Paizo, having shared a decent amount of staff. They're on the bigger side, but I think with what's going on in the RPG community, it's a good place to look.
Fair. This does come out in February, but I don't think things were going to change much with with Hasbro's stance on it anyway. So,
well, and if you don't know what we're talking about, that's a place to look back through and see what happened up till now.
Right. I mean, this sounds kind of conceited for the hobby, but it's a historic moment for the hobby. With this, just much like the turn of the century with 2004E was. So, anyway, without getting too political into that and distracting us and getting us off topic, let's go ahead and get into our discussion this time, which is theater of the mind type of stuff, but not just that. So, let's go ahead. I'm shifting around. There we go. Let's go ahead and get into that. So, does anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, miniatures and grid is superior, so alright, conversation's done. Let's go.
Oh, we're starting off hot. All right. So let's see what we got here. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people would agree with you. Zachariah likes to do a lot of battle grid stuff with his miniatures.
Well, and of course, that's not my actual opinion, but you know,
right.
I mean, the way that I do it is I do both, and for me, it comes down to the people I'm playing with, because I started this whole thing, which led me to owning Open Legend, was starting a game which involved my dad, who is presently 73, and I guess when we started, he was probably 64-ish, 63-ish, somewhere around there. Okay. But for him, he didn't conceptualize well with theater of the mind. So, and that's when I started with Roll20 then. Back when it was an infant. And so having stuff available for him to see the exact positions and understand that made it very helpful for him. Whereas when I played with other groups, I've been able to do most of it, right, with just theater of mind and describing stuff.
Very true. That is something that I have seen as well. I also seen that it is something that depends quite a bit on not just the group you're playing with, but the type of game you're playing too. Because horror games can very much benefit from the theater of the mind and letting them conceptualize in their own way what would scare them in this particular moment and those type of things. So you giving descriptors but not actually showing something, it can be very helpful, which is why a lot of people don't like to use miniatures with Call of Cthulhu, the system and stuff, though that's not necessarily something that you can't use. You can always use some miniatures, especially in a battle type situation. But the expression of those things doesn't have to tell everything about that monster either. So that might be something to talk about, is just because you're using something for a miniature doesn't mean that thing is that thing. So who hasn't used like a D4 for this thing or that thing on the grid and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Well, that's like when I go to Gen Con and I was running games, right? I had little like white placards for things.
Mm-hmm.
Board grain scraps are so perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I started a game at a Thanksgiving table with a bunch of family and just started using salt and pepper shakers and napkin fork just to give some sense of space.
See, and that's where you could also use like you use candy, right? And then it was like if you do the finishing blow, then you get to eat the candy.
Yeah,
right. And then
done that with the kids before.
Well, I think the other thing that makes a difference too is the actual system you're using, right? Because there's like Dungeon World, right, where stuff like where you are relative to a person doesn't matter as much. Like if you're looking at like D&D 2E, right, where flanking matters and the side that you're holding a shield matters compared to if there's a person on that side or this side, and so that stuff is hard. That would be a lot harder to do in Theater of Mind. You can still do it, but that definitely plays like the ones that are more abstract versus ones that are rules light versus rules heavy, or abstract versus tactical. I think that makes a difference too in how well it'll work for the game you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And there are some games that function, some systems and games that function on zones instead of actual physical positioning. So still having some kind of representation, but just moving that representation of your character through the zones is what matters. But everything else is theater of the mind. Everything else is all those other things that we're talking about. So it can depend a lot on that and what your game is going to be. So the whole debate between theater of the mind versus minis, which was a lot hotter in the previous years than it has become now, because people kind of burned their opinions on it, and then that candle of their opinions has kind of sat there now, and it's done.
Yeah, because I was going to say a lot of times I default, especially with like Bomb Squad, I have the grid whiteboards. I'm not a great artist. Half the time I don't have time to draw anything anyways. I like having the grid because then we can kind of have a general space, but then I find it a lot of fun to, like, in the Iliad time skip that's the most recent on the channel, like Too many Taylor Hayes. Kari, Zek's playing Kari and wants some height. His character wants some height advantage. I didn't have anything drawn on the map, so it's like, alright, let's roll your presence for like luck. Or it can become a communal storytelling moment to like build the map as you're going. Well, what does your character want here? But I still have the grid, so for targeting, for distance, you have some kind of scale to match. Not that that's necessary, but sometimes I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. I find I do currently, I think I lean towards theater of the mind, and that's probably just because I don't have a lot of time. I want time to put maps together, but I don't always have it, so it's just one less thing to do. But I do find if I'm doing theater of the mind, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Where's the balance between, is this a con of theater of the mind, or is this just me not successfully utilizing it? That I don't do enough movement in the battlefield. I don't utilize the space as well. It's a little bit more, I do this attack, or I do this spell, or something like that. And becomes a little bit more just shooting attacks back and forth. And I feel that I don't utilize the space well and help expand the space as well when I do theater of the mind.
Well, I think that that is something you can bump into, but I think you may be also short selling a little bit of how you've handled it before, because if you remember back to if you remember back to the battle in the egg room in not the house shear, the big mountain.
Oh, Felvenari. Yep. Doesn't matter.
Where all the eagle peoples is. Where all the eagle peoples is in your... our Kuro's hometown. There. That whole thing, you had some height in the way they were handling their attacks. It's not necessarily that expanding it out doesn't happen. It's just... Perhaps it's a little both. So... I guess it comes down to choreographing, to use your film terms for you, choreographing the fights in your head on the spot is a lot different than spending a lot of time developing the map and then having that there to choreograph from. So it's all in your head at the same time. That can get tricky. But
while keeping your players on track of the choreography you are trying to have happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Verbally explaining what you see in your head for somebody else's head, for somebody else's mental head to get a hold of, that can be tricky. So.
Yeah.
I should have brought it up before when Moustache had his hot take at the beginning. It made me think of some YouTubers did. One of the big guys, he's bet on Critical Role.
Dimension 20, it was Brennan Lee Mulligan and another guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were doing a hot takes back and forth on that.
About. Yeah.
That cracked me up. It was so good.
Yeah.
But that they're kind of, hyperbolically referencing what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and I think another key thing, which kind of you hit on with maybe not realizing it, is the tools available to you. Right? So depending on if you have minis, if you have grids, if you have that, like, I'd be interested to see how you handle running from a VTT. Because have you really run very many from a VTT yet, Dan?
Not with, actually using an uploaded map like Jake does.
Right. Yeah, so because that changes things too. Like when you have time to work and make a map and have everything like that, because then it's easier for you to be more dynamic with. Well, it depends on the individual, but since you've got the full map and you've got the knowledge of it and you've got the tokens that you can easily move around, right? Then you can sometimes be a little bit more. I don't know if dynamic's the right word here, but a little more dynamic with how you're using the NPCs when that happens, right? Depending on how good you are at describing with theater mind. So sometimes it comes down to the tools available to you. Do you have a lot of the minis? It's like, looking at some of the, actual plays where they put a lot of work into the battle maps and things like that. They've got the time, they've got the resources to make those. You don't need those, right, to be fully immersive, because you can have, like you said, candy and treats and salt shakers and a napkin, and people will remember that and talk about the battle, and they won't necessarily be talking about how the salt shaker did that. They're fully imagining, in their mind the thing, right? So it's cool when you do that. And somebody has the time and energy to make those awesome miniatures. Like, I mean, you've got Zach and Alex and other people making those minis, and that's awesome because when you get to see them. So sometimes it comes down to your resources.
Yeah. I know I can personally do a grid on the fly in person a lot faster than I can do a grid online. A lot of the time, I am prepped much more in concept, because I'm at my job in just thinking through all of the things I want to do, but I haven't had any time to physically prep things in that sense. And, at a table, we have pack of markers, drawn grid paper, and I'm like, alright, we've got, a forest scene, I need, a river going through it, I need some trees. And as a table, we'll be working on that. We'll pull out our rubber duckies for our characters, which we have all drawn our faces and rough clothes on.
Yeah.
It's... Because you can buy so many rubber ducks and markers and you can like make your character. You can have fun little NPCs. We had like a large ducky with a back thing, and when you were swallowed by the Remoraz, we sat your ducky on its back.
So what Levi's saying is, rubber ducky, you're the one. You make combat so much fun.
Right, but unironically, like, there's like theater of the mind. You can definitely, especially if you're good with your descriptions, give that feeling still, but like everyone else looking at the table can see, oh, if I don't get this person out of that, I'm remembering a specific story right now. We don't get that person out of the Remoraz, they're going to die in its stomach acid. And it's a nice reminder there visually. I think for a lot of people, it's at least with a actively dynamic battlefield, it is easier to keep track of things when you can just like scan the field again and see what all is happening, as opposed to like trying to recite the entire story through the back of your head to try to be like, all right, they started there, they moved 10 feet, moved down 20 feet. If I'm in a tactical style campaign or session, it just makes it so much easier, in my opinion, to keep track of things when you've got a grid and something representational. I don't care if it's M&M's, rubber ducks.
Well, and you know, especially if you're having to deal with any of these millennials who have horrible attention spans, and you know, you have to have a grid because they can't handle theater of mind. They can't keep track.
Yeah. No, I have a specific. It's not a superheroes game now, but while it was a superhero game, the first session that one of the players was able to like fully keep track of everything was when we pulled out a grid.
Well,
So it fit the stereotype. Now, it was a system that wasn't usually meant for a grid, so we had to hack it some, but...
Oh, interesting.
Well, and, you know, that's kind of how I do it, is I'll usually, unless I've got it already, like, planned out beforehand, depending on how complex it is, a lot of times I'll start with Theater of the Mind, and when I see it getting to a point where the players are maybe starting to struggle, or where they're starting to be, you know, taking a little bit longer to think, then I'll start drawing some things out. Because I do, the vast majority of my games are virtual. Right. So I'll just, you know, with Roll20s, draw thing, and now Foundry that I'm getting into it, the ability to just free draw, I can just quickly just draw like what you were describing on the paper. I can actually, because I've done computers all my life, so I can quickly get in there and draw. You know, as a kid, I used pixel by pixel drawing in the old MS Paint on Windows 3.1, where you were literally picking the pixels because the screen wasn't that big anyways, right? So I can draw real fast and get something going there. But so usually a lot of times I'll do that. I'll start Theater of the Mind, especially since I'm an improv heavy GM and random encounters can happen and stuff like that. So I'll just start it that way. It's usually when I know that there's going to be a major scene. Like I'm doing Cyberpunk right now with a group, and they've just figured out their mission. And so Theater of the Mind, I quickly drew the stuff at the end of the last session. And so I'm using that to make the map, because I know there's going to be some 2 specific locations that they've got to do. But the rest is just, you know, going to be mostly them describing stuff.
Okay.
So that's what I found, is I usually do Theater of the Mind until I see the facial expressions, or I can tell from their voice that they're starting to maybe struggle, you know, the gears are starting to smoke from having to, you know, think a little bit about the scene too much, then I'll start to draw it out. So that's a little bit how I do it.
Yeah. When I've had to work with the kids in Adventure Academia, it has been quite enlightening having to run for kids versus having to run for adults. Kids don't need a lot of prompts to try and get the idea. It's almost easier to run for kids than it is for adults, because kids are used to imagining things, and they're like, when you tell them, oh, the dragon's in the middle of the room and you guys are, it's way up above in the ceiling. That was probably the hardest moment that everything got around to, was trying to make sure they understood that a certain MacGuffin was up in the ceiling and the dragon was still down here, and there was space between that. That was the only real time, and that was because we were dealing with vertical space. And I think vertical space confuses more than horizontal space. If you keep their feet on the ground, you get less confused. That's why underwater campaigns and
we're rough.
Space, those are a lot different because you have 3-dimensional movement. You have not just forward, backward, right, left, all that type of stuff. You have up and down. So, for those type of situations, I think that if you have people going up and down a lot, that it is important to have some way of conveying that to them, especially if they're older, because they will be thinking more tactically most of the time. So
older people are so set in their ways too.
That's true. The older you get,
I know. Like, we're all getting closer and closer.
Well, see, if you recognize it, then you can do something about it. But the kids is really good with that otherwise. And if it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing how they progress with it, how they handle it, because the next few will be a bit more, it'll be similar to what they've done before, but the level has gone up, so that increases their skill level, their numbers, and deal with the numbers they're dealing with and stuff like that. But the actual necessity of miniatures, I use Foundry for the map and everything, but I really haven't made them a battle map except when I was doodling it on the board for them before. Now I don't need to do that. I have Foundry, and if I want to put a battle map up there, I can go find one, because the resources are there. There's free maps online, and most of the time, I mean, your players aren't really going to care. As long as they have something to visualize from. They won't care if the grass is the type of green it's supposed to be at that time of year. They won't care about that. You as the GM, if you're an obsessive GM like I am, with the way the setting works, you want to find, the grass is a brighter green now because it is spring. No, we can't have that. That one's too dark. You just got to get over that. Your players aren't going to care. They just want to have some representation for the battle map. And I think what we're all kind of saying here is it's the battle maps that are really where this whole mini thing goes. Because outside of that, there's not a lot of reason to use minis unless you have a very, very detailed, maybe intrigue campaign where they're in a ball and they need to know where everybody is. But maybe that situation...
Right. I mean, again, it's always balance, isn't it? But I'd throw out, even if you have minis, I think what we've hit on too is, and I found at minimum, even if you're doing theater mind, it can help to have the minis on a space, even if it's not a grid. For some people, it helps to be like, you're this far away, relatively speaking. So you don't even need a map, but if you have minis, or, like we said, any other objects can work. But it can be fun. If people have minis, but you don't have a map, you can still put them out on the table and kind of space them out a little bit, you know? You don't have to go full wargaming and measure, but you're like, yeah, you're like a move action away, or you're 2 move actions away, and then this is what we're going to represent there. That could potentially help in the balance. If you don't have a full map, or you don't even have a grid, but you have items on the table to kind of give a setup, I think you could save a little time in Theater of the Mind of being like, well, how far away am I, or where am I again? Where's the bad guy again? Is he up, down, left, right? Like, so potentially I think it's a sliding scale, right, is what we're probably getting at. There's a sliding scale of however much, like Moustache was saying, how many resources you have, and time being the largest resource, or the most vital of them all.
The most valuable of them all.
There it is. Thank you.
So I think two things. One, you mentioned height, and how height can be hard, and that's equally so in theater of the mind and even in miniatures, because that's a resource, right? Having one of those plexiglass or whatever, or a thing that you can make somebody be higher, it can be hard. Like even in virtual tabletops, it can be hard. And that you have some tools where you can put like numbers or something on there, this many squares up, or what have you, right? To make it a little bit easier. But yeah, height can be a thing. And the one thing that's certainly in favor of miniatures is it can be a cool thing to have after the campaign or after the session, to have that many. Like even a simple thing. So like what I did when I went to Gen Con is I had these they were like tombstone like shaped little white placards. And then they had a little like V thing that is slotted into, right? And so what I did was I had a bunch of markers and stuff. It's like, here, you can draw your own character. And so they all got to like just doodle something, and I was like, you get to keep that, take it home, right? Which is a cool memory thing. So, having that miniature, I mean, you're going to have memories whether you do theater of the mind or whether you use miniatures, right? But then when you also have this thing that you get to take home, right, it adds another memory, another thing to collect dust too. But it's still another cool thing that you can take with you. That is a boon to having miniatures versus theater of the mind.
And it's fun using that to bounce off of. Like, Austin is going to have forever Arc Hero, or at least Avenue Studios will have forever the Arc Hero Mini. And he'll be able to always, that will cue up memories and fondness and nostalgia in that. And to have it as a memory tool like Moustache was talking about, and being able to look back on those things, that is fun. That is definitely fun to have. Especially if you try to go and use Arc Hero's long lost brother, cousin, son, something. You need another Birdman. So
yeah, we got lots of them.
Oh, let's switch cameras.
Penguinis, but you got to be a Patreon or local supporter to know what I'm talking about.
So that is a boon.
There we go.
That is a boon for minis.
Hello. Yeah. No, for sure. Like, just a quick side on Arc Hero, because of everything that happened with that character, we can't even use that mini for anyone else now, or if we do, the weight of all those memories is going to be on that, so it would be a very conscious choice to then use that mini. And
hey,
so
Dan.
Now that, yes. That's adorable.
The memories.
The memories.
But yeah, that's so true.
Things are fun to have.
You've got that many to stand there always, right, and remind you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, since we've covered a benefit of that, we've been kind of covering theater of the mind and miniatures benefits as we've been going on. And if you, the viewer, have been trying to write them down or jot them down, we've been discussing how there's the tactical advantage that you have. With minis, you have the memories that you can hold on to with a physical object. You have these other benefits that are useful for vertical or for depth-based combat and travel. You also have, with Theater of the Mind, different kind of benefits. There's the easy prep we've been talking about, or the simpler prep that we've been talking about. You have the ability to take something and incorporate something which we haven't touched on this yet, to incorporate something that comes up spur of the moment directly into it like it's always supposed to have been there. That's a lot easier with something where you don't have the map written out to be like, sure, there's this right there. Yeah. When it fits the story or something like that. So, but most of the time, if you're playing with a group, you get a feeling of just about how much you can spur into a situation without them suspecting, is he doing that behind the scenes? What's going on here? So,
well, and to bounce off that, I think it goes back to a little we were talking about. I apologize, can't remember who said it, but the style of play too. Because when you're saying that, I'm thinking about when you have the map all made out, whether it's virtual or physical. I think there's an assumption with the players that, okay, this is a prepped space, and we have to work within the confines of what's there, which can be fun. I think both of these are fun. Is everything I see here I can use. Hopefully they're looking at the map and utilizing everything you put in there, and they probably assume too, rightly or wrongly, doesn't matter, that you have planned ahead of time for stuff on that map and with the miniatures. Versus a theater of the mind is more like what I was talking about earlier of crafting it together. It's like, my character would really like to have a height advantage. Is there something in the area that I can utilize to do that? And so you can be building the space together as a group, and you can incorporate roles into that and different things to make it part of the combat. So those are kind of the pros and cons of that. Once you have the map, the canon is kind of established. I personally, I tend to go with what the players want too, so I'm cool with adding stuff to a already pre-made map. But I think generally when the players come in and they see a map that's printed or they're on virtual tabletop and see it all laid out, it's like, this is canon, this is reality, there's nothing else. If I don't see it there, it's not going to be there. Which can be cool if that's the type of that's gonna push your game in a certain direction, have a certain feel to it. The players generally will approach it that way, and will probably look for the little details in your maps and the stuff you put there and try to utilize it, hopefully, if you have awesome role players. And then on the flip side of Theater of Mind being more open, and it's like, we're crafting this together. If you want something, you might be able to do that, and that can totally change. That could change the combat altogether. If someone's looking for height advantage, and you make it a roll, and that leads to them, they discover it, but it ends up collapsing on them, or they're not able to climb up it, or now the baddie can utilize that. It gives a different. I think it gives a slightly different feel at a meta level that may affect the game. So that might be something to consider too. Of course, on the sliding scale.
Unless you subvert expectations and on VTTs have stuff that's hidden that they're like, oh yeah, and then suddenly it pops out. So that they don't know if it's actually not there, or if maybe they need to do something special to activate it or to see it. That's like, it was really interesting. There's this one game, and the guy was building kitchen. He said, all right, everybody roll for initiative, because there was like birds or something happening, and so everybody rolled for initiative that are going. And it didn't end up being anything there, but because they rolled initiative, they're like, something's going on. But it didn't end up being anything. It was just them being paranoid about maybe being attacked. Right? Yeah. So it subverts expectations. Are we rolling initiative because there's something really there? Mm-hmm. This time, so you can always mess with people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably a discussion in itself, but because the hobby is as old as it is now, you can utilize those psychological moves. Like,
right.
In the beginning of the hobby, I don't think a lot of people would have the way to roll for initiative. I don't want to get sidetracked on a whole psychology, cultural discussion of, critical role, making it popular and everything, so now people know what that word means and it holds weight. But I'm 100%. That's a really good point.
Well, even just a group you've had for a while, roll for initiative eventually gets the same effect if you haven't messed with them beforehand. And I should say on the collaborative aspect...
You know, the other thing I like to do to my players sometimes is like, well, I guess we need to roll for initiative now. Because then they're like, wait, could we have not had to roll for... Wait, what did we do?
We missed a speech check. Failed.
That NPC will remember that. Sorry, what were you going to say, Levi?
Yeah,
About collaboration?
Yeah, in my in-person group, as opposed to any very pretty map, it's like dry erase grid paper.
Wonderful.
So, like, as a group, like, for encounters, I have always made my group help me draw up the map within basic parameters of the region we're fighting in. And then to represent power and whatnot of monsters, I might use different size of dice or something like... Because I'm a cheap person, I do not have all the fancy minis, I do not have a new pretty map for each place we're gonna be in.
Frugal, right?
Frugal.
Yeah. Right, but, like, I don't have any qualms with the word cheap. I'm like, no, it's legit. I like to spend little where I don't have to. Frugal is also true.
There you go.
Semantic, positive connotations on the word.
Well, because, like, for me, it's like, I view, like, cheap is not necessarily a negative word. So.
That's why I like to use the difference between inexpensive and cheap.
That's fair.
Because to me, cheap does, and it doesn't always in how people say it, but to me, I like to lean towards it actually meaning a little bit more negative versus something being inexpensive. Because you can have inexpensive stuff that's way better quality than expensive stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I also use it in a slightly self-deprecating manner to remove tension for if other people feel like I'm shaming them for spending more money on things.
And see, now we're getting into Levi's
There's a whole psychology.
So
what's with all the psychology today?
Bringing it back around to tabletop.
Okay, so my core point here is that it does not have to be non-collaborative just because there's a map. You can have as a group drawing a map and like them adding in trees and rocks and maybe a leftover campfire if they're having a little fun, right?
I like that a lot too.
It also gives me more time to mentally get into, okay, we are in combat mode, brain get ready.
Yep. I don't know, I'm sure you guys will agree, but anytime you can offload a little GM work to the players, where
nice.
Not only doesn't detract for the game, but it might actually add to the game. Oh, it's so good.
And they don't even know it's happening sometimes.
Right. I really do like that. Depending on again, I think it comes to that feel of the game too. Depending on the players, what they want, because if there is a little bit more of the old school GM versus players, and I'm not even saying that in a negative way, but that's kind of the game you're playing, then a little less collaboration probably makes sense.
Well, I think like what we were saying at the start is it depends on your players to a degree, because there are some players who really like to do certain things, and so you can reward them by doing that. Like, I think there's this one game I watched where somebody lets this total nerd actually do like the initiative, dropping down the initiative tags and flipping them on this little tower. So
weirdos.
But
everybody likes to feel like they're in control, right?
Right, yeah.
It's delegation, okay? It's delegating.
Delegation. First word.
And if they want to be delegated to, even better.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yes.
See, if I ever get enough stuff put together, because I'm building up stuff to use with the kids in Adventure Academia, eventually they may have an initiative tracker, and I'm going to say, you run the initiative tracker. Delegate by appointment. So.
Yes.
So, go ahead, Ben.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
Are you from Canada?
Jinx.
All right.
Yeah.
So the other interesting thing, two other interesting things I want to point out. One, I've seen where GMs will even say, all right, assign players to track the HP of monsters.
Mm-hmm.
right? So they'll say, all right, and they'll even at the start of combat or after the first hit, be like, all right, their AC is this, so you guys know if you hit or not. You are tracking the health of this monster, you're tracking the health of this monster, you're tracking the health of this monster, to offload. And another interesting thing that I've seen, I don't know if any of you guys would be interested in doing this for a few sessions or something, is where somebody set it up so that there were two GMs. One was in charge of the story and the narrative, the other was in charge of combat. Which was an interesting thing. So they took care of all the monsters, all the fighting, while the other GM took care of the story in or outside of combat.
I've done
even more
of that with Jake. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. No, you're good. That was useful addition. A way I've seen GM specifically do this is having friends as guest villains for sessions. So it'll, as opposed to a structure where it is more consistently built in the two GMs, they'll be the main ones with the core of the story, but they'll have different people, so specifically in this case from a Discord server, join in to play the main villain and their lackeys for that session. It was very Monster of the Week style game, so it suited itself really well to that style.
Cool.
It was also good GM brain offloading because someone else got to run all your monsters.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so if you guys ever need a villain to pop in for a session, I'm just going to say I'm available.
I'm available to torture your players at any time.
I would love to be a villain. It's fun.
Noted.
Alright, I played the villain recently. I'm okay with that. It's fine. I'm trying to think of who I'm going to do next time. Probably somebody. I played the Tormentor, villain figure. Played Irons, authority figure. Played Vididi, authority figure. I need to play somebody not an authority figure. I need to play somebody subservient next time. So that's the idea.
Support class character.
Well, that or just absolutely yes, it is yours, as you wish, sir. Yes, or something. I don't know. That aside, my desire to play something different aside. Coming back to Levi's, a couple things that came off of what Levi was saying and what you guys kind of built into. Expectations for different types of games, like we've touched on before. If you're running a Warhammer game or a game that is based around that, you are coming into that knowing you're going to need maps. You know you're going to need combat minis, all that type of stuff. Whether you're on a VTT or using physical minis, doesn't matter. So there is that idea of expectation, and this can be something that if you're going to want to change or stretch your GM muscles, you might want to talk about that with your players beforehand, before you start a sum shot or a campaign, where you're going to say, where you're planning to have less combat, if that's what you were heavy into, versus what you were doing before. If you had heavy combat, tactical combat before, but you're wanting to do something more theater of the mind this next time, discussing that with your players in a session 0 is important to set expectations so that everybody's on the same page. Because if you're saying you want to compromise and do zone combat, then say that. In the session 0, set expectations accordingly. Because, we always tout in the session 0 here.
Yeah.
Yes.
This might even be a case for session 0.1, where you have another session 0 in the middle of the campaign, because there are some things that aren't working for you that you want to change.
That is true. You can always have, like they call them, mid-campaign check-ins or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I always checked with my players after every session. How'd you like it, guys? And it's like, oh, yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Well, in this case, I'm assuming that the GM is the one who feels something off and would like to change it, and checks in with them, hey, I want to change this. How do you feel about this change? if you have been running a game and you dislike how tactical it is, maybe, and you want to go more descriptive than specific, like than grid-based, you're like, hey, how would you all feel if I went to, as you were saying, zone-based as opposed to exact square-based? Doing a check-in of that sort, as opposed to asking them how they were feeling about what did happen, asking them how they would feel about something new going forward.
Mm-hmm. And zone's really handy, even if you have been using tactical combat. Zone can be really handy if you're facing one big bad enemy, because it just is zone combat then. Can you reach that person? It gets fishy and kind of tricky when you have multiple people that you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So, there's that. Visual, the other thing that came up was visual language and visual communication to your players. So, as Levi said, his maps are Sharpies, dry erase on grids or whatever.
Yep.
If that's what you're, one, the expectation of your players, and two, the thing that works for what you're trying to accomplish, that's fine. Because if you build a map, and this goes back to a little bit of what Dan was saying about having things in the environment, if you do environmental storytelling, and there's some bottles over here on this, and potions right there on this table in the alchemist lab, and there's this, and there's that, and there's these other things, like these tubes, or whatever, and what have you, and there's these implements, don't be surprised if you put those on the map that the players are like, I throw that at the enemy. You better be ready. Because they're probably willing to throw all different types of liquids at something that's trying to kill them, especially if it's non-humanoid. So that is something to consider. That visual language and the visual storytelling you're doing. If you're saying that these things are in this area, your players are probably going to mess around with them in combat or out.
Yeah, it's kind of what Dan was saying before, a little bit about meta, right? Because if it's on the map, it must be important. Like, he wouldn't have bothered to put it on the map if it wasn't important. Just like if you're just...
Even if you did.
right,
whether that's true or not.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. 100%. That's like, if you describe it, oh, he described that for a reason, that must be important. And they spend like an hour on this thing that doesn't matter, and you're like, rah!
I was just giving you some visual information.
It's
so true.
It's a little tangent here.
Go ahead.
But so I was describing something in game, and it was this NPC that I was going to introduce that was had backstory with my dad, actually, with my dad's character rather, and I slipped by calling them the name of a goddess, and like, oh, that's really the god. And so I was like, whatever, fine, she's the goddess. I just made her actually be the goddess instead of a champion of the goddesses, who she was going to be originally. I was like, fine, she's just the goddess going forward. My dad's character had a relationship with a goddess. Fine, sure, whatever.
There you go. Just for a second. Sure, Dad.
Whatever.
That's what it is.
Whatever, that works. It'll work. It's fine.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll throw out on a positive note too, to like, don't be stressed by that. It's quite wonderful to be appreciated and think you're actually thinking through all these things.
Right, yeah.
And you're just, totally had that plan.
And it's funny too, your players, whether you put it on a map or you have a token for it, it's a token in VTTs, which is where my kind of experience comes from it with this idea. The first campaign I ran, we did on VTT in Roll20, Beginnings and Endings of Many a Great Hero is what it was called. And they had to go across the continent and all that. Took months in game and in real time. But the interesting thing was that I would have some things planned that they would think, well, how did he plan that? Or how did he plan this? And, and it's just because I knew how they were most likely going to do something, because I had them kind of figured in certain ways. But then these other things that they thought were planned were not planned at all. So I had to build around those things instead. And it was things that were not necessarily tangential, just not what they were expecting to not be built out. So those things were done. And this happens in Theater of the Mind as well as in minis. If you make a token for it in a mini, or if you describe it, in our case with Theater of the Mind, they will latch onto it in some way, because it's kind of like when you're writing or when you're shooting a film or when you're doing anything, what you give attention to, they'll give attention to. And if you say something, whether, especially in Theater of the Mind, but also in battle, in like a tactical miniature style map, they will think about that. They'll ruminate on those things. If you can get if you know that about them, you can drop. If you know just about the right amount of hints to drop, it gets really nice to have them pick up those little breadcrumbs. So having a fun thing you can do with minis is NPCs that are repeating, and like villager 1, villager 2, villager this and that. A lot of the times you don't have villagers on your map, right? Because they are always there. If they're in a town, there's villagers, and a lot of your fights happen in towns or in places that are populated because there are other people living in this world, other NPCs. And a benefit that Theater of the Mind has is you can describe people, but you can't. You can describe things in the same way, with the same words. Players can sometimes have a harder time picking up repeat characters that may be following them, or maybe looking at them, maybe in the same place over and over again, or in the same town as them over and over again without them knowing it, because you're having to explain it by Theater of the Mind. If you have the same mini show up in every single town that they're in, they are going to do one of two things. They're going to think you're lazy and reusing your minis, or they're going to be like, wait a second. That specific NPC picture has been in every single town that we've been in. And then you can do little sprinklings of breadcrumbs that way if you choose to. So that is a slight advantage to minis, or in our case, tokens. You can have that same little thing each time. You have to do that with descriptions in Theater of the Mind, and that can get a little tricky to keep up with if you do.
Yeah. I think one of the best ways to really get your players freaked out about the specific mini is the one time they're in a town and that mini isn't there. Because I think before that, like, I know a lot of DMs will default to being like, oh yeah, here are some of my... Or if you make sure to change out every other NPC mini that you have for the town. Because a lot of them will just populate the town with the same quick, easy set.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to... I think one more step than just having the same mini each time to draw their eyes to it.
Right. Has to do with expectations.
Yes.
Because if you're the type of GM who use it, you can do this a little bit easier in VTTs. So this is kind of more directed towards it. If you have a unique token for every major NPC they're going to interact with, including like the barkeep or the specific beggars in the towns or something like that. If you have those type of NPCs ready, and then all of a sudden this same beggar appears in every single town, you're like, they could get like, what? And that can get fun to mess with. So,
even if you are being lazy and just reusing it, and they're creating that weight to the story, and you're like, yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah.
What was funny in one of my campaigns, there's this character Norvon that I created who was he sold stuff, but he also had an information brokerage or whatever. But he'd always show up in horrible costumes, like disguises, right? And so I described this person like, when they roll perception, I was like, yeah, you see this short old lady over there, and you notice that one of the boobs is way down here, and the hairline is a little tilted weird, and like that's Norvon. Like every time I described anything that was like off, even if it wasn't that bad, they'd be like, that's Norvon, isn't it? And they go over and talk to them as if it was Norvon regardless.
There you go. It's like the Team Rocket thing, Team Rocket's always terribly disguised, and we as kids were always like, that is Team Rocket, Ash. How dense do you have to be? So, no more for those watching. No more. Yeah. Oh well.
R.I.P.
End of an era. Not because Ash is gone, but because
being 10 years old sometime.
He should have. I'm just saying, he's got like Voldemort levels of longevity there. I'm just throwing it out. How many times did he split his soul? Anyway,
different discussion.
Different discussions.
Yeah.
If you want,
he always gets rid of Pokemon that evolve because they're too old now. Anyway.
Well, if you want to hear us talk about a necromancer-specific discussion, let us know in the comments. But we need to get on to final thoughts for this one.
Did you see what I posted in the chat, by the way? Relevant.
Looks behind
the first one reminds me of the warehouse meme.
There we go.
See it in the distance. A warehouse, is that like a house that turns into a larger building at the full moon?
Yep. And then the DM furiously scribbling, now. It is now.
Yeah.
The thing that makes that funny is that meme you're talking about specifically says that it is a new player that says this. You know that all the old Grognard players are like, stop talking!
Don't give him ideas. Yes.
Alright, so final thoughts. Anybody want to go?
Miniatures are superior. Theater of Mind sucks.
So says the guy who runs Open Legend.
I think the big thing is utilize what you have, and of course communication, like we always say, session 0 sort of idea. Figure out what your players are comfortable with, and don't think of it as a versus. It's a sliding scale. I think that's what we've really come to. It's like whatever you have available, and be aware of and this is like an overarching thing for running a game. Be aware of what meta the players will probably bring to the table with it, like we were saying, with maps. If you have a very detailed, well set up map with minions, with minis or tokens, that's probably going to bring some assumptions. Players sitting down at the table are going to have assumptions. So try to take that into when you're crafting. And you can make any of it work. As long as you're having a good time with the story, be ready to flex with whatever happens. And my always last comment is, comment below your thoughts, and also tell us what you've done before, or where on the sliding scale between fully fleshed out map and complete theater of the mind you like to fall. Because RPG stories are my favorite stories.
There you go.
I think my final thoughts are pay attention to your players and what works best for them, because it'll be a better experience for everybody if you do that. Because I remember I was doing a session, and again, my dad, and he was like, I'm having trouble with this. Can you draw this on a map? I was like, yeah. Immediately, drew it on a map. So, if you can catch that before it happens, even better, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Be flexible.
Be flexible.
I will say you do not need super fancy maps or minis to get the idea across. Candy, rubber duckies, pencils, cups, torn off pieces of paper with things quickly scribbled on them. All of these will work similarly well for getting your brain where you need to be to just be like, alright, am I in range to walk up and smack that person? And will this other person stab me in the back while I do it?
Yeah. Might not be a good idea if you have minions and them represented by shot glasses, because that might get a little bit tricky.
Lemon juice.
I'm gonna go sack that one. Why? He's way over there. You have to spend all your movement and get an attack. Yeah, but it's another shot.
It's tasty. That's my preferred
I'm
drink.
sorry.
You didn't pour the one next to me that I wanted.
You guys always give me good ideas
Battle
of doing
beer.
that, and it is shot glasses, but it's some's hard alcohol, and some is like a sweet juice, and some is that disgusting leftovers from whatever.
Not with some hot sauce.
Yeah, some is hot sauce.
Ugh.
What a great fun one-shot that would be.
Oh man, no one wants to.
You have to finish what you kill. Period.
Yeah.
There's no option.
No one
You kill
wants
it, you
to
finish it.
No one wants to actually kill the big bad red dragon because it's a shot glass full of hot sauce.
No, it's just it's just a Tabasco bottle.
It's a Tabasco bottle. Oh.
You kill it, you finish it.
Yeah, it gives a whole new. I usually use the phrase "finish him" when they finish off a monster. So that gives new phrasing to that, new meaning.
Suddenly, you have your players healing the enemy.
Yeah. We definitely want to talk this out.
I really like. Guys, I might steal this for a live stream.
You guys
This feels like a Patreon reward.
This does. Oh
So
my gosh,
what-
vote on what you want in the glasses.
So what Dan's saying is, if who is a Patreon reward for him getting because the Galilean patrons supports
Make their pet NPC like the most delicious, like slushy or icy drink possible.
figure out what everybody's favorite drink is, and then after you have all their favorite drinks, you make those the enemies. But everybody's fighting to get to their favorite drink. But you keep moving and positioning them so that it's harder for them. The battle's harder, so that it's like, oh no, don't do it, Dan! Don't kill mine. I'm gonna. And then Ryan kills Austin's favorite drink, and so he has to drink Austin's favorite thing or something like that.
I really like this idea, guys.
I mean,
Right.
David would just kill all of them and drink all of them. So.
Right,
Yeah.
accidentally.
That's
Shot of lemon juice, shot of mayonnaise, shot of, like, half... Oh, what's that? The name for the lemonade iced tea mix? An actually nice thing?
Arnold
Okay.
Palmer.
Thank you.
Okay. Zachariah needs to watch this specific moment, so I'm going to put this right here. This is my final thought. Okay. My final thought is, Zachariah, you need to take this idea about the food thing and make up Telahay chests, where each of them go through, and there's all these different concoctions in these different glasses in this battle board. And the Telahays play...
Oh my gosh.
And Kari made it up. And the Telahays play Telahay chess by battling these different things together and then having to drink or eat or whatever it is, whatever's in the glass.
Oh
So
my
there you go.
gosh. I love that. It becomes part of the strategy to make all your glasses disgusting so they don't want to win.
Right. Oh, when you go, that could be like kinging on checkers. When you do it, you make yours nasty. It changes. But they have to finish it if they want to beat you. It's like, oh.
I love it.
All right. That was my final thought. So that is the phrase for this time, for anybody that made it this far into the video, comment Taylor HS down in the comments. So, there you go. I think that's what we've got today, travelers. So, thank you for stopping by. Any final things from you, Dan, about the stuff you've got going on or anything?
No, I don't think so. Keep an eye out for our collaborations. March of the Mechs begins it with March 2023. Very excited. It's going to be a fun year. March to March. All kinds of good stuff. And we're going to have a lot of fun. And I also recommend checking out Levi's Spotlight and seeing what's going on in the community for RPG and all this stuff. It's fascinating, and it's cool to see what's happening, as much as some of it's aggravating, and I'm really interested to see how it all plays out in the end. So, who knows? Future people, let us know how it goes.
Yep. Future us, comment down below.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Any final things from Open Legend or Great Moustache?
Just check out the system. It's always free and available on the website.
There you go. And then...
Legend.
Yes. So, you can always support both the Interplanar Crossroads and Avenue Studios on Patreon or Locals. The Interplanar Crossroads also has a subscribe star, if you use that instead, or want to contact either one of us through directly to support us, you can do that as well. We're both trying to... Avenue Studios is trying to reach a few more supporters, 2-3 more supporters as of recording. And the Interplanar Crossroads is trying to get to $100 a month of cumulative support. So that's what we have. As always, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
Bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to do the get your favorite beverage this time.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Which I did. That was fun, guys. Thank you.
Hey, Dan.
Yes. He's not. He doesn't like it. I don't know. His face. Oh.
Yeah.
Somebody screenshot it.
Magical mishaps. That's what
There
that
it
is.
What is that about technology?
Oh, yes. Hey, man, deep fakes and stuff like that.
It is pretty crazy.
You can decide if you want this in magical mishaps or not. I'll keep it not too spicy. But the deep fakes on Rings of Power with Rowan Atkinson's face are the funniest friggin' thing I've ever seen.
It is pretty funny.
They should have cast Elrond. They should have cast Sir Rowan Atkinson as Elrond in that show.
I mean, it would have fit the mood.
And I don't know, whatever it is about the actual actor and Rowan Atkinson, their facial structure must be close enough where it looks legit. And when it's him talking to Durin and it's both Rowan Atkinson, I lose it every time.
I mean, they tried so hard to make it to where the dwarves had these sayings and stuff like that, but really, give me the meat and give it to me raw. Not the best thing to go for.
Here's what I'll say though. That would totally come up during an RPG campaign, and that's what a player would come up with on the spot as a hot take.
Yeah, but there's a reason that we don't write what we say in RPGs. We kind of cultivate that and curate it. We kind of refine it, polish it up before we put it into published works.
It makes me think about how they say that Guardians of the Galaxy are the Avengers playing a TTRPG, and the Guardians of the Galaxy are the characters that they picked.
I have not heard that. That's really good.
I forget
Makes
who
sense.
they said it was playing Groot, and it was because he didn't really want to play, so then all he said was, I am Groot.
Yes. That actually makes a lot of sense.